Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You're here with Jeffrey Freed and Kirk Patrick Miller. This week, we're going to talk about resiliency. So, to me, I mean, everyone can look up the definition, but a lot of the idea of just going through life when you are constantly hit and hypersensitive to sounds, lights, for me, anxiety, um, you know, there aren't medications that help kind of tone down the world. There's nothing that is a perfect solution. So, I mean, for my take, I would say every human being, one of the most important skills to build up is resiliency, the ability to get up the next day and push onwards. Um, Jeffrey, you've worked with people for so many years. I know you have a ton of stories of individuals. You don't have to share anything in particular, but when you think of resiliency, what group of people do you think of?
Well, I don't really think about neurotypicals because neurotypicals, I mean, everybody needs resiliency, but they tend to bounce back because the world is not such a heavy place for them. It's kind of built to accommodate their processing skills. However, the people I work with, they get beaten up a lot. Anybody on the spectrum or with bipolar disorder or ADD is used to getting the hell kicked out of them. And it takes a really, really strong person to come back from that. The problems that other people can just deal with sort of automatically are not the same for the population that I work with. They, like you said, they feel everything more. All of their senses are attenuated. The world can be a cacophonous, exhausting place. And if you have to constantly be bouncing back and always be on guard, resiliency is tough to come by. Um, Resiliency works for people who, have sort of average sensory awareness. They're not dealing with so much adversarial experiences. So, yeah, they've got a much higher probability of being able to deal with trouble when it comes. Folks I work with, their whole life can be strife. That kind of rhymes. Um, they're battling the lights, which can flicker and make noises. To
Noises,
them,
yeah.
people don't pick it up. They're battling their sense of smell, which can be so extreme. They can hear people masticating, and they can smell the food, and they can feel the saliva, and it's really tough
Even the
to.
sound of people mixing food, to be
Yeah,
honest, it always drove me crazy. My sister would stir like salsa. She liked salsa. And like I still to this day, if somebody she didn't even do it that often. I always yelled at the poor thing. I was so intolerant. And it was because what you mentioned, it drove me insane. It like
yeah,
I would hold on to my tongue as long as I could. And after about, 30 seconds, and suddenly I would just burst out and shout at her and say, "Stop that, knock that off. What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" And she's just literally stirring, I guess salsa into her rice or something. And I was so aggressive with it. So when you bring that up, that really hit home for me because a lot of people don't talk about, yes, at food or at restaurants, like hearing the sounds. And also, I would say I was even self-aware, or self-conscious about, do I make these noises when I eat because they bothered me so much. So it was actually really difficult. Food was a huge issue for me. And I don't want to get off topic on a tangent, but we now know how important nutrition is for stability. So it was actually, and I know, again, not to get off topic, but I know a lot of the individuals on the spectrum are texture based, and a lot of the foods they eat and prefer are more sugar. And so nutrition, all that stuff. What I'm saying is it was so difficult. I kind of found myself in kind of some stuck positions where I wasn't able to help myself.
yeah,
I think learning how to ask for help is a huge step in building stronger resiliency. Um, I think what you mentioned, where some of these individuals that you've worked with, and I like to think of myself as resilient because I've gone through a lot, and I think one of the key aspects for people to remember is it's okay if you're getting kind of beaten up and torn down a little bit to feel, you know, a little sad, down. The key part is learning not to let that break you.
Yes.
Be- and that is so difficult because there's such a fine line nowadays. I feel like almost everyone is on that verge or that razor's edge, like we've talked about before in the past shows. But the ability to bounce back, bend, not break, learn to ask for help, those are all decent strategies. I think that for some of the people that are listening that have children with neurodiverse minds, it was really hard for me to communicate. I didn't understand that I was upset about those sounds. So you were just describing like a restaurant. Are there some other like
Oh, yeah.
particular ones that you can go into where if maybe parents are a little bit more aware of that, and then they can kind of help their children become more resilient and not feel so alone. I did feel very alone, and it's harder to be resilient when you feel like something's wrong with you and you don't fit in.
Yeah, well, I would say crowds, loud events, um, could be something as simple as a track meet or a soccer game or going to a baseball game with crowds. It's exhausting because the people that I work with pick up, they read people really well, too well, because they don't know which signals to pay attention to and which ones to throw out. I envy neurotypical people in a lot of ways because they don't pick up as much and there's less on their menu. So it's easier to choose and it's easier to be resilient when you're not always getting everything kicked out of you. Stay away. I mean, if I'm wired like this, I will have trouble with crowds. I will have trouble with loud noises. I will have trouble with clothes. I will have trouble with reading people and maybe figuring stuff out about them that's not really good, and learning what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. Kind of nobody knows this. It's just if you're on the spectrum, it's because the orthodoxy would say that you can't pick up signals and you can't read people at all, but that's not true. What's true is that you read them too well and you pick up too many signals. So the world's so confusing. And then
There
because
you
they're
go,
not,
mute button.
yeah, very good. It's an excellent comment. And what happens is if you let people know, if you can put it into words, what it's like for you to sit in a crowd, what it's like for you to go to a movie theater that's loud, what it's like for you, how painful it is to wear a suit, or dress shoes. And if you go into a smelly environment, it's hard for you to handle that. You educate as best you can the people in your life, and you say, I'm not looking for any excuses. I just want you to factor this in. So that if they understand, the stress level gets lower. And if the stress level gets lower, you will be more resilient because you won't always have to be on edge, because you can wear down, being on the spectrum. You can easily wear down. It's very hard for you to go into a social situation. And if people understand and respect your style, which can happen, I mean, there's also places now that have autistic friendly environments where you can go to a movie and it's not loud and obnoxious and you can wear headphones and you can sort of not apologize for having just one or two friends and not being the belle of the ball, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it lowers the stress level. And if the stress level's lower, you're going to have more energy to be resilient. Those people that I know, who are autistic, they're high functioning autistic, but those people, are sometimes the most courageous people I've ever met because they build an environment that suits them, and they don't apologize for it, and they do verbalize what the world is like for them, and they're not asking for sympathy, they're just asking for understanding. If
I
you do
love
that,
the yeah.
if you do that, and you talk to your parents about it, your friends, your wife or husband, you're going to be less stressed. And again, ad nauseum, if you're less stressed, you're going to be more resilient.
I loved what you mentioned about the communication. There was not, and by the way, that works two ways too. So if you're a parent, a lot of times if you see the child suddenly melting down, the knee jerk reaction is typically to, maybe penalize them or, punish them because you go, okay, this behavior is not acceptable. And a lot of times, the right solution is to, move to a quiet place and then try to figure out, ask them, what is bothering you? And a lot of times giving them permission to share, it's helpful. So the biggest problem I had is there was no way to describe some
Mm,
of the issues that I was having. Like I'd be driving in the car and my one ear would get hot, and my family thought it was kind of like funny. My sister was kind enough to switch because she could see how like it drove me crazy. It was so uncomfortable. I can't really express it in words. And so what I did was I blew up. There were a lot of explosions and anger and frustration because the world, and you also brought up one other thing, and I'm going to that. The world it wasn't just the world in terms of lights or sounds. You brought up being able to read people. I could feel people's energy. So if my mom and dad were upset at me, it made me more upset. So a lot of it is like a feedback loop. And I felt like for me, and I was never diagnosed with autism or on the spectrum, but some of the bipolar tendencies and OCD and those things, they have some overlapping symptoms, definitely hypersensitivity. So when you mentioned clothing, I still don't like, I actually like the look of a suit. I hate the
uh,
feel. I
oh,
do not like the feel of a cotton that just, it feels like it's choking me. It always
yeah,
cuts into your neck. And you need to have it proper. And then you wear a tie and you make that tight around your neck. I mean, everything is uncomfortable for me.
yep.
So I liked sweatpants or like a cotton t-shirt. I wanted something that would breathe. And a lot of people didn't know. So it wasn't easy for me to communicate. I think if a parent had come to me and said, like, is your clothing? Because my mom got tired of seeing the same shirt, right? So she would often toss it and be like, now the reason that she got rid of it is probably torn up and there were holes in it. I didn't see it like
And the
that.
smell. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was like a comfort thing. That was the only shirt that really worked. And so that communicating, being able to tell each other and say, this really matters because of this,
Yeah.
or I can't be in this environment. I loved what you said because the clearer people can communicate, the better off they are. And, you know, individuals on the spectrum are usually very good at communicating some of the things that they are passionate about. And
They're usually afraid of it. They're usually
yeah,
afraid of being judged. And to relate to what you said, I had amazing clothes sensitivity. I would not wear a suit. And my father used to beat me because he thought I was just being, obnoxious and
difficult.
difficult. Yeah. And to this day, if I think about wearing a suit, I get creepy feelings and itching and ugh.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. And it's like asking somebody who's neurotypical to sit in a really really cold room for a long period of time and then say to them, "What's wrong with you? Why can't you handle the cold? It's everybody else can do it," and if they'll believe you. But it's that extreme when you have close sensitivity, when you have sense when things hurt your ears because they're too loud. The world can be a pretty damn abrasive place for people who have hypersensitivities. And it wears you, like I said, it wears you down. You just get tired of fighting all the time. So the resiliency goes out the window. because you're just trying to survive. And I know people that have had no understanding from people and suffered abuse, and they still made it. They still believed in themselves, but that's hard to do when everyone
Yes.
thinks you're flawed, because that's where you get your self idealization by the way other people think about you. So it's tough, and most people can't do it, but they can if the load is later.
I love that. And if you are in a relationship, it doesn't matter if you're talking children to an adult or from, two partners in a romantic relationship, communicating how you experience things helps the other person understand.
That's
And all
very
of a sudden, when you're kind of crumbling and you lose that, I mean, we all have those moments where just the weight is too much. And so when you start to kind of crumble and that other person knows you really well and they understand why you're crumbling, all of a sudden they can help with that so you don't crash. And that's like I said, you don't want to break. It's okay if you bend a little bit. We all have to kind of grow and strengthen ourselves. And it's usually through discomfort. But when you can share that with somebody else and they get it, they grasp it, it's very helpful. And you can't do that without communicating. And then once you understand yourself, it's okay to ask for help. So let's say you're at a ball game. I mean, this is something that happened to me. I didn't even realize I was having a panic attack. I wanted to go see Michael Jordan, and he was playing the Nuggets, and he just beat the Nuggets so badly. And I mean, he was like a hero to me from basketball perspective. And the Nuggets really weren't all that great, but they were the home team. And it was interesting. I had all these emotions going, and I literally stopped. I couldn't breathe. I was like panicking. And the person that brought me, there's no way I could communicate, like even what I was going through. And so he was, and he didn't talk to me much. He was a therapist in a school counselor. I knew him because he had taught me to play basketball. He was 6'11", really tall guy, and he'd played semi pros. So he really didn't even ask me in terms of like what was going on. And I didn't have that ability to communicate those things. And that was when I was, I think 17, 16, 17. I'm trying to remember the age, but it goes to show you how long I felt I was wrong or there was something wrong with me. I was broken. And that continued in all the way pretty much through my 20s and 30s. And feeling like that is not fun. And I feel like a couple of the things you mentioned where, when you're able to communicate, if I was able to, and if there were, I feel like more people are open to it. When I was younger and you said, listen, this room is too loud or this, and like at a concert, people like would laugh at me. And I didn't it, like the noise was so big. Like when the bass like muddles, I it just it I can hear it tear through all the notes. It's too much. So for me, I needed like, if I'm plugging my ears at a concert and you're 18 years old, you can't do that. You're gonna get your butt whooped by your own friends, right? I mean, so there are all of these social things that people are supposed to do, and when you don't fit in with those things, it's really difficult because you're trying to choose friendship. You're trying to, I guess, please too many people. And so I really liked the other thing that you said where people really just need to be proud of themselves. And again, some of the individuals you've worked with who just know who they are and they don't apologize for it. And once I think people start realizing how resilient they can be, it's also easier to continue to be resilient. So we can hop in and close out maybe with a little bit about neuroplasticity, where we already know we can help our brain. So if you're in a state where you're having a hard time being resilient because the world is beating you down, if you continue to do a mantra, we talked about manifesting in our last show. If you can really put in the work, you're going to get great results, but it has to be with positive self-talk. If you're beating yourself up constantly, it's just going to tear you down too. So resiliency does not mean finding everything you're doing wrong and trying to beat yourself up and make it like perfect. That's not the right way. Resiliency to me is kind of, surviving every day and working towards a goal, whether it's a tiny little step forward or, every once in a while we, stumble backwards. But I think just trying to move forward every day is literally, to me, resiliency. And the communication, Jeffrey, I love that point. I think we can kind of close. I don't really think there's a lot
Yeah,
more.
I'm good.
Is there anything?
No,
Okay,
there
so
isn't. I thought that was very succinct. I liked it.
let's just go ahead and close there. Thank you to everyone who's listened. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back next week. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.